showing that technique right after we show Harai Goshi. Sith Lord Andy Hung from Dojo Outfitters, okay? That was Ryan Roberts. We're going to be showing this technique after we show Harai Goshi, so stay tuned, okay? It looks like this. So for Harai Goshi, okay, we want to make sure that we start south of the elbow, get a nice sleeve grip here, okay? And my pointer is going to go right on his collarbone, and now our hands are ready to... For Uchimata, I tell a lot of my students, like, we generally want the person to fall kind of forward for Uchimata, okay? For Harai Goshi, a sweeping hip, we want to bring him over this hip corner. So the direction is actually up and over that hip. All right? And when you look at the technique that way, you can see how it's starting to slowly change from Uchimata. Okay? Now, how do we get him over this hip? Okay? It comes from first my hands and second of all my feet. Okay? The hands are very similar to Uchimata, that there's a nice pull. Okay? And I tell my students, we don't want to get too far in the armpit, because the leverage is just not the same to pull this person, okay? We don't want to be too far on the sleeve either, because now there's just too much slack in the position, okay? We try and go from the elbow and maybe just like an inch or two south from there. And that's going to give us a nice control over the limb and give us a nice extension that we want for Harai Goshi, okay? For the lapel hand, I'm going to put my pointer maybe right on his collarbone here, okay? And that's going to give me a lot of slack and some play in the collar, so that when I want to get that nice extension over his hip, I can start to guide him over that leg. Okay? Now for my hands, I'm trying to, again, get to that nice angle for Harai Goshi. So my elbow of my sleeve hand is actually going to pull up to that angle. Okay? And I always tell my students too, I try and tell my students to think of more about their elbow than their hand. Okay? If we just think about the hand, only my hand is going to move and my elbow stays behind, okay? But if I think about elbowing someone behind me, that elbow is going to open and look how my hand elevates, okay? So really think about your elbow pulling up. For the hands, when we step, we want to make sure we get a nice kuzushi and off balancing. And remember, it's at that angle coming across the uke's hip, okay? For my feet, right, we're moving the whole foot device over towards the hip we want, meaning my lead leg has to turn over and my pylon leg has to drive back. So something that we really want to work on for Harai Goshi is a body connection, okay? I want to make sure that I'm pulling my opponent to me and not having myself step into my opponent, okay? And the difference comes from the distance which we create from the first step. I want to make sure that when I step, I'm not stepping into my opponent here. I want to step so that there's at least a foot between us, so that when I backstep and pull in, we get that nice connection from my hip to my oblique to my rib. Right? We want that nice body connection. Okay? One thing that we really want to focus on too for Harai Goshi is my hip. Okay? It's a koshiwaza, categorized by a hip throw. So what we want to do, if I could face this way maybe, I want my hip to eclipse Ryan's hips. Okay, what does that mean? When I step into the technique, okay, just to let go of my hands really quickly, I want my hip to shoot past my opponent's hip. Okay, so one more time. It's a hip technique. So when I step across, I'm going to scoot my hip out, so that when it's time to finish the technique, right, he's going to go over my hip and we'll get that nice rotation that we're looking for. Okay. Another tip that we want for Harai Goshi, I call it the pylon leg. Like at a construction site, they drill the pylons in, okay? That's going to be my back leg, okay? In this case, my left leg, okay? The reason why I call it a pylon leg is that I want it to stomp and set the tone for the technique, right? Every time you come in, you should hear it. For my feet, right, we're moving the whole foot device over towards the hip we want. Meaning my lead leg has to turn over and my pylon leg has to drive back. The reason why the pylon leg is important is because in a certain exchange for a brief second, there's going to be an exchange of energy and weight between us, okay? At one point for Harai Goshi, my one leg is going to hold my body weight and my opponent's body weight, okay? So it's important that it's placed properly. When my pylon leg drives down, my lead leg comes up. Now when we come in, right, when we finish this technique, I want to make sure that my right sweeping leg is one device and my forehead pendulum's down. So a good way to kind of think about your finishing for Harai Goshi is similar to Osotogari, okay? So when we do Osotogari and when we do Harai Goshi, we want our leg, our reaping, sweeping leg, to be one piece. Meaning that I don't want my leg to break around the resistance of my uke's leg. So in this case, if it's Osotogari, it breaks this way. For specifically Harai Goshi, what I don't want to see is for us to come in and then break over this resistance, okay? It has to be one piece from my foot to my hip, okay? What also works is my forehead. It's like a pendulum. So as my foot goes back, my head goes down. Right? You can see how almost one whole half of my body is working together. And this is very similar for a Harai Goshi finish. Okay? This is a good drill to develop your Harai Goshi. And the reason why it works well is that it really teaches you to feel that sticking point of your hip and your body right before you execute the throw. We want to be able to come in and load the uke up on our hip. Okay? Make sure you keep your sleeve activated. Don't let your sleeve die here. Right? As you get better, you can start to lift your right leg up. Count to 2 seconds. Then throw. Right sweeping leg is one device and my forehead pendulum's down with my foot, okay? Looks like this. As the tori, it's my responsibility to make sure that the uke lands in a complete ukemi, okay? It's my responsibility. So I want to make sure that my technique is clean. So there's 2 things we could do. We want to make sure that we keep our hands on our uke throughout the whole technique. So once the ukemi is done, then I can let my hands go and transition to something else, okay? The second thing is mentality. With our mental shooting this technique, we want to commit to it one time. Don't half-ass it, okay? So when we finish it, it looks like this. Is one device and my forehead pendulum's down with my foot, okay? Looks like this. Okay? And that's just some pointers to help develop your Harai Goshi. Definitely find the good uke, the best uke in your dojo. Give this a try. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us at Dojo Outfitters on Instagram. Mahalo.